We on the Tank Encyclopedia team love to share what we discover about tanks and armored fighting vehicles with you, our readers and viewers. We also like answering questions that we receive on our website, on Discord, or here on YouTube. However, sometimes we get questions that deserve special attention. The nice folks developing the game Arms Trade Tycoon Tanks have again asked for our help and sent us a number of questions to help make their game more historically accurate, and we have decided to answer them publicly in a series of YouTube videos. Arms Trade Tycoon Tanks is a game that is still in early development and that aims to give its players the chance of running a successful tank building company, from doing technical research to designing and building tanks and then trying to sell them at home or abroad. And of course, learning from what happens to them on the field of battle. So here is their question. Our game has minor parts that are installed in major parts or components to create multiple variations both externally and internally. For example, as shown in the figure, one has a possibility to install a tail wheel, chicken wire, or ammunition rack in the whole component. Please note that various tank components will have a different number of available slots for given modifications. These modifications will be grouped in certain categories. What is your view on the proposed groups? Do you believe this grouping is enough for all time periods between World War I and up to modern days? Are there any additional groups that you would recommend to include? Well, let's have a look at each group in particular, and let's start with the hull. The hull. Cooling for the cooling of internal components, fuel for fuel delivery, exhaust for exhaust and muffler, lubrication for the lubrication of internal components, ventilation for the ventilation of internal compartments, hatches and doors for means of entering and leaving the vehicle, sight for awareness increasing devices, communications for both internal and external communication, storage for ammunition and fuel storage, MG mounts for machine gun mounting devices, gun mounts for main gun mounting devices, protection for additional non-hull integrated protection elements, and external, any external devices that didn't make the above classes. Well, of the more modern things that could be added there, NBC protection and air conditioning could be folded in under ventilation, while command and control systems and GPS could be folded under comms. Thermal and infrared sights can be entered under sights. Fire extinguisher systems should be added to this area as well, as they were a very important component of tanks from the Second World War to today. Tools and spare parts would also often be carried on the outside of the hull for limited repairs and maintenance. Otherwise, you seem to have a very exhaustive list. Now onto the turret. Hatches and doors for means of entering and leaving the vehicle, sight for awareness increasing devices, communications for both internal and external communication, traverse gear for turret rotation mechanisms, storage for ammunition and fuel storage, MG mounts for machine gun mounting devices, gun mounts for main gun mounting devices, protection for additional non-turret integrated protection elements, and external for any external devices that did not make the above classes. Again, some of the newer things could be folded in under the current list, such as the commander machine gun cupolas and the remote weapon systems being folded in under MG mounts, thermal imaging under sights, and so on. However, several things seem to be missing. First off would be the smoke dischargers, which were quite useful on tanks during the Second World War and up to today, as they provide a quick escape from some sticky situations, although these could be folded in under the external category, come to think of it. Some vehicles, such as the German ones, had mini mortars in the turrets that could fire smoke or even fragmentation rounds, and those were internal systems. Another device that is missing is the laser warning system, which would notify the crew if they are being targeted by a laser rangefinder, and active protection systems to protect against missiles. Stowage would be another important thing to add in here, as it was quite important for crews to be carrying their belongings. Now for the main gun. The recoil system, devices used to reduce or counteract the recoil. Loading for the mechanism to increase rates of fire. the fire control for devices used to increase accuracy, breach for the internal breach mechanisms, ventilation for fume evacuation devices, and the mounts for internal mounting mechanisms. I'm guessing that rangefinders, which, while not in use during World War I, became very important after the Second World War, could be included under fire control, although they were sometimes separate devices that were independent of the gun. These would give a better first hit probability and faster engagement times. Gun alignment systems would also fall within the same range. The aiming sight and coaxial machine guns were usually fixed to the gun, so they could possibly appear here as well. However, and this is the most surprising hole in your otherwise fairly exhaustive list, is the ammunition. The shells available for certain guns are usually updated and replaced with superior ones during the lifetime of a tank, not to mention the additional of new ammunition types for different uses. This could be added here and would probably be one of the most important categories. Now for the machine gun. The cooling for the cooling devices of the MG barrel, the magazine for the various types of ammunition magazines used, the receiver for the internal mechanisms of the machine gun, the mounts for internal mounting mechanisms, and fire control for devices that are used to increase accuracy. Now, these seem a bit excessive. Usually, if an upgrade was needed to the machine guns of a tank, nobody would change certain components, but rather they would change the whole machine gun. So the cooling, magazine, and receiver categories are probably not needed. As for the gun, some arguments might be made for the rounds themselves, although these were probably upgraded far less than their big gun counterparts. For the engine and transmission, we have no comments, for those seem to be on point. For the engine, you have the crankshaft and internal engine components, the cylinders, the pistons, the flywheels, the exhaust manifold, and the fuel injection. For the transmission, you have the gears, the axles, the clutch, the brakes, and the final drive, all of which are pretty self-explanatory. For the running gear, you could probably add extended end connectors, which were the extra bits of metal added to the outside of each track link to improve ground pressure and floatability. Now for the running gear, you have the tracks, the drive sprocket, the idlers, the protection, and the external devices that did not make it into the above classes. Suspension-wise, some new experimental suspension systems might have active components, meaning that they could read the terrain and then adapt the suspension characteristics to offer the best possible ride. For the suspension, you have the absorbers, the springs, the balancers, the rollers, and the axles. As for the other categories to be added, a case could be made about the new discussions held within the Abrams upgrade program for the introduction of unmanned aerial vehicles to be controlled by one of the crew members for observation, which would be a new system completely. Another variant, which was never adopted for an AFV, would be articulation, in which a vehicle would be made of several separate sections that could be coupled for better mobility. However, what is probably best for you guys to keep in mind is that new types of minor components and even minor component groups can be added in at any time in the future. You do not have to scratch your heads and dig through archives to find them all right now. Focus on what you need for the era and the nation you are now working on, and the rest will follow suit in its own time. Also, this seems to be a very exhaustive list of components, and if the final product were to match this, Arms Trade Tycoon Tanks would be every rivet counter's wet dream. We are very much looking forward to it. Well, that was it. We hope this answers some of the questions that you have, and the accompanying photos will help the Arms Trade Tycoon team with their game, and we hope you have enjoyed watching. If you like the idea of the game, you can find a link to their website in the description below. If we missed anything, please feel free to comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us get our videos out to more people. Until next time, keep us in your sights.